Episode 49 of the Photime Podcast. This time we're talking 10 meters, 10-10 international net, and more fun on 10 coming up.
MTCRadio.com presents Photime, the other ham radio podcast. Found online at PhotimePodcast.com. Now, here's your host, Cale Nelson, K4CDN.
Yeah, welcome into the 49th episode. And, I'm thinking about this. This seems like a really, really big deal. We're coming up on actually the 2-year, 24-month anniversary of the podcast. And 50 is just looming out there. If you've been here for a long time, you know that this kind of all started as a really poor internet inside joke. And it's blossomed into something far greater than that. What has it become? Well, if you're a brand new listener, this is the Photime Podcast. It's the podcast that caters to the new guy, new gal, individual coming into the amateur radio hobby, looking to learn more about the depths that this hobby actually has, how far it goes. It's amazing how deep this rabbit hole goes, and it's just a single hobby with millions of branches, and we're just now getting started exploring those. So we thank you for coming in. My name is Cale. My call is Kilo 4 Charlie Delta November. I am in South Carolina. You probably figured out that pretty quickly about the third word that I said. But anyway, we've been doing this for almost right at 2 years. This is episode 49. We invite you to go check out all of our episodes. They're all there at PhotimePodcast.com. And when you get there, if you don't want to listen through your iPhone or your Droid device, you can click the podcast player tab at the top and allow you to go backwards and forwards in the history of the show, and you can determine which one you'd like to listen to. You can listen to it right there on the site. If you prefer a different route, of course, you can use your iPhone, Android device, your tablets, your computers. There's also an RSS feed there on the left-hand side of the page if you'd like to go there and just kind of scroll through and see what we've been talking about over the last 2 years. But anyway, we're here again, and I just say thank you. I thank you for all the greatness that you guys have poured into this show over the last 2 years. It's been a lot of fun so far. And again, my name is Cale. I'm the host of the program, and this did start out as a really bad internet joke that turned into a really cool podcast. And the reason that it kind of became what it was because of you, the listener. And thank you all who have been participating with us. And thank you again to our friends at MTC Radio. They are the official show sponsor. They've been with us before we even had a show. I know that sounds ridiculous. There's a story to that. Well, maybe we'll tell it one of these days. But if you don't know it, I approached them and said, hey, my name's Cale. I want to start a podcast about amateur radio, and I'd like for you to sponsor me. I don't have any material for you to listen to yet, but I will, and it's going to be really cool, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And that's what happened. So if you need radio gear, well, let me just say this. The reason I approached MTC Radio, a lot of things on an internet forum that I participate in, a lot of great stories about how great they were and they took care of their customers and they went above and beyond in customer service. I did some business with them. I got the same results. And I'm just the kind of guy that if I'm going to have someone support me or if I'm going to have someone stand with me, partner with me, I want them to be of the utmost integrity, the highest moral standards, and that's what I found with the folks at mtcradio.com, and that's why I had no problem when I decided to podcast who I would go out and get to help support the show. So I can unequivocally tell you that they are some of the finest people in the amateur radio business. If you need some gear, that's where I would start. Before we get into the program, I just want to stop right here and say thank you. You guys have just completely blown me away. I mean, it doesn't make any sense what you guys have done to help me get to Dayton. Stay-at-home dad, zero income kind of guy, and you guys have just showed up in a massive way and blessed me I have no other term to use to get to Dayton, to help me get to Dayton. Funded the crowdfunder 211%. It's insane. It's completely insane what you guys have done. And I want to say thank you again. If you don't know what we're talking about, this is your first time in. Dayton Hamvention, it's the nation's biggest ham radio event coming up in May. I am a stay-at-home dad, single-income family, have 5 kids. I don't have money to go do stuff like that, but we really wanted to get the program there. A lot of the listeners were asking to have the program, the Photime Podcast, there. So we put it back in into the listeners' hands. We passed the plate, if you will. and through a generosity.com giving scenario thingamabob there, you funded at 211%. I'm just floored, and I don't know what to say. And Kel doesn't come up and run out of words. He doesn't. Ask my wife. It doesn't happen. I don't not have things to say. But at this point, this period, this time, I'm just completely floored. I'm so honored. I'm so humbled that you thought enough of me to give to this, and we're going to make it great for you. I'm really excited. We have begun working in earnest to make this an awesome experience for the folks at Dayton who come by and see us. We're going to be doing interviews at Dayton. Jeremy's going to be man on the street. Kel's going to be dude in the booth. George is going to be there with his Pac-10 antennas. Sarah Tibbetts is coming. John Pugliano is going to be there. Bruce Jewett's going to be there. So we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to be at, I think it's Bravo Alpha 406, I think is the number. Check the show notes. I have dyslexia, so sometimes I turn stuff around. But we're going to be in Dayton at the Hamvention, and Kel's going to be there because of you, the listener of the Photime Podcast. Just completely humbly floored, and thank you so much. Now, in the midst of all of that, someone contacted me, and it was completely unsolicited. It was just a listener who decided to send an email. That's how this stuff works. I've got an email address. You can contact me anytime. I'm pretty responsive, by the way. So I got an email from a gentleman named Keith. His call is Kilo Romeo 7 Romeo Kilo, which I really like. That KR7RK is Keith Schlotterman. I think I might have just mispronounced it, but I pronounced it correctly when I actually talked to Keith. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm really bad with names. But Keith contacted me and said, hey, do you think you'd be interested in talking about 10 meters on your show? Well, of course we are. And one of the reasons we're so interested in 10 meters here is because we have a lot of new people who are just getting licensed, coming to their technician's license, and they want to get on HF. Well, that's always not the easiest thing to do, except you can get on HF on 10 meters and have your technician license. There's a slot there. We're going to talk about it here in just a second. But Keith sent me an email and said, hey, matter of fact, I can talk about 10 meters. I can also talk about the 1010 International Net. And I had questions for a very long time. What is 1010? What is 1010 International Net? I just couldn't figure it out. Didn't really know what it was. It's very interesting, and I think that you're going to really enjoy this program. There's a lot of great information here. So if you're brand new or you know someone who's brand new, they need to listen to this program, because 10 meters is an excellent way to get your technician, your friends that are technicians, get them interested in HF so they'll want to go ahead and pursue their general class license upgrade and get on HF, because we all know that's where the fun is. So check it out. Here's our show with Kilo Romeo 7 Romeo Kilo. Yeah, here on episode number 49, the Photime Podcast, we've got Keith Schlotterman, whose call is Kilo Romeo 7 Romeo Kilo. He's here to talk with us about 10 meters. Keith, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for dropping in.
Yeah, thanks, Kel. I enjoy listening, and glad to be on the show.
Yeah, well, guys, what you don't know, but I'm going to share with you, Keith actually volunteered himself to come on the program and to share with us today about 10 meters and the 1010 Club. And we're going to learn some stuff that I've been wanting to know since I got licensed. But first, really, 10 meters is a great band to use, and we'll talk about it in just a minute. But, a lot of times I hear 10 meters is dead, 10 meters is over, don't even tune to 10 meters. Is 10 meters really dead?
No, not even close. 10 meters is alive and well, and has been for many years and will be for many years. Just as an example of that, yesterday in the WPX contest, I worked several DX stations right here. I was running 30 watts into a very, very poor antenna setup because I was in my office working at the time, but I couldn't get away from the radio. And, it really is not dead. There's always opportunities for contacts on 10 meters.
I like to say 20 meters is my favorite band, but I'm going to assume that maybe 10 meters may be your favorite.
I would say 10 meters is my favorite band. It's certainly not I'm not exclusively 10 meters. And if you looked at my log over the years, I probably, also have more contacts on 20 meters, but as far as the joy I get out of operating 10 meters is definitely number one.
Well, talking about going back and looking at your log, Keith, give us a little bit of back history on you and your amateur radio career.
Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an amateur radio operator, and I had a little shortwave receiver that my grandfather had given me. But I never actually got the license. I went through the CB craze in the mid-'70s and had a CB radio in my bedroom and stayed up all night talking on the CB radio during that heyday of CB. But I never actually got my license until I was off into the working world. And in the early 90s, I became aware of 1010 International Net and joined up with that. And so I guess my amateur radio experience started really before I was licensed. I would tune around and listen to hams and try to understand what they were doing. But it wasn't until I was an adult that I actually got my license. Well,
I can appreciate that. I resemble that remark. And I went through the second CB phase. They were around in our cars in the 70s when I was a kid. But when I got my driver's license, I guess that we all just went to the closet and got our dad's radios and put them in our cars because it kind of had a resurgence locally. And it worked great until Nextel came around, and that kind of took the place of CBs. But, we still had a lot of fun with those. 10 meters, the most fun I've ever had on 10 meters was in my vehicle, driving up and down the interstate over a course of one Saturday on a 10-meter contest with just a modified CB radio antenna, and it was just like the band was on fire, and it was a marvelous time. And to me, that is probably the most fun amateur radio experience I've had up until this point. And I don't know if it was because it was 10 meters. I don't know if it was because I was mobile, because I don't have HF in the truck anymore. But it was just a blast, and the contest was a lot of fun. Everybody was having a good time. Is 10 meters like that very often, or does it just kind of come and go?
Well, it does come and go, but what you're describing is typical of why so many people really get a lot of fun out of 10 meters, because when it opens up, it truly opens up, and you can, people like to say you can work the world with a wet noodle. You really don't need a lot of power. As my experience yesterday showed, I was running 30 watts. But you also don't need a huge antenna, and it's a great band for operating mobile, for example, or taking out with a Go kit and setting up in a park or on a mountaintop or something. You can work the world with a very short antenna. A quarter wavelength on 10 meters is less than 9 feet long, and so it's a great mobile HF band. And yes, when it opens up, hams around the world are ready for that, and you can have just a crazy experience with rapid fire QSOs, but you can also have people just chatting away, and it's just a lot of fun, and you don't know when that's going to come.
We were talking about CBs, and it's really hard to talk about 10 meters and not talk about 11 meters. And this isn't going to be the CB show, guys. This is probably the most we've ever talked about CBs, but mine's up here on the shelf in the box with the packaging and everything. But it's really close in frequency, and at one time, actually 11 meters belonged to the amateur radio band, if I'm not mistaken, the band plan there. But tell us a little bit about what 10 meters really is.
Well, so you're absolutely correct. Amateur radio used to include 11 meters. The Federal Communications Commission decided to open that up as a non-licensed service and created the Citizens Band, and actually that kind of drove the formation of 1010 International Net back in 1962, when some amateurs thought, well, if they're giving away 11 meters, 10 meters could be just around the corner, and we better try to promote it and get some activity on it so that we can say, hey, we're using it. So 10 meters these days is 28.0 megahertz all the way up to 29.7 megahertz, at least in the United States. Which is a very wide spectrum, by the way. That's almost very close to 2 full megahertz of spectrum, and you don't see that kind of width in the other bands. And that allows, it's almost a free range with all kinds of opportunities for different modes of operation and so on.
Yeah,
so
you could try to dial through with a VFO, and it takes a while to go through 10 meters just spinning the knob.
That's right, yeah, yep.
So you said band, you talk about the band, we talk about the modes. Is it split up like the rest of the bands where there's particular places you can use this, but you don't really need to use that kind of a thing?
Yes, there is a 10-meter band plan The ARRL has it on their website, and like most of the HF bands, the lower frequencies in the range are dedicated to Morse code and digital modes. So in the case of 10 meters, from 28.0 up to 28.3 megahertz, you're going to be limited to CW or RTTY or PSK31 or any of the multitude of digital modes that are out there nowadays. Once you get to 28.3 and up, then you can also use phone modes. And 10 meters is extremely unique because once you get up into the higher end of the band, you can actually have frequency modulation, FM mode operation, and you don't see that in the other HF bands. So the FM modes that we use, say on 2 meters or 70 centimeters as amateur operators, you can actually use FM on 10 meters as well. And there's even 10 meter repeaters, which are they're different in many ways from the local repeaters that we're all used to, because you can use a 10 meter repeater to talk to somebody completely across the country or even in another country using a repeater.
Wow. It's pretty awesome stuff. Now, when I turn the rig on 10 meters, I normally go to 28.4 because that's the calling frequency, isn't it?
28.400 is sort of an unofficial calling frequency, yes, and on voice modes. So you'll find, and by the way, in 10 meters, normally people will use upper sideband, unless of course you're using the FM on the higher range. But so if you're tuning to 28.400, you're probably in the upper sideband mode on your rig, and right. It's very often you'll find people. Probably the most common is 400, or 28.420 is also very common.
Okay. Now I've got friends, and I'm going to call him out on the show because he's usually about a week late listening to the program. Actually, he called me today and said, I just listened to the latest program you guys did about Dayton. He was all excited about me going to Hamvention, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I'm going to call William out, Kilo 4 Sierra Alpha Echo, because he's one of my best friends. He's a licensed tech. He now has his own HF rig, and he wants to use some HF, which of course would be for 10 meters is what he could use it on. But he just hasn't taken the time to get started. What is he missing by not putting that dipole up in his backyard and just getting on the air?
Well, so first off, 10 meters does have privileges for all modes. Sorry about that. 10 meters does have privileges for all classes of licensees in the United States. Mm-hmm. As a novice or technician class licensee, you can use from 28.0 all the way to 28.5 megahertz. So that covers the entire CW portion of the band, as well as the first 200 kilohertz of the phone portion, and you can actually run up to 200 watts of PEP. And so what he's missing, I would say, is the magic of HF propagation. And nowadays we can get on our 2 meter and 70 centimeter HTs, and we can use D-Star or Fusion or something, and we can talk to people in other countries. So it's not so unusual anymore on amateur radio mm-hmm. to work DX even on those bands. But on 10 meters, you can have a direct, simplex conversation with somebody in Argentina or somebody in Japan or somebody in the United Kingdom or Germany, and you don't know. And there's a magic to that sometimes unpredictability is kind of something that drives fun. And so I would say that's part of it. And then as you experience that, you also start to learn a little bit more about the ionosphere and radio in general. So I think I would encourage all classes of licensees to, grab an HF rig or even a 10 meter only HF rig and try to get on and use that band. It's the only one. It's the only HF band that's completely open on the phone. There's other allocations for novice and techs in some of the lower bands, but it's only for Morse code operation. 10 meters is the only one that allows phone.
Right. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come right back with Keith. His call is Kilo Romeo 7, Romeo Kilo, and we're talking 10 meters, his favorite band, and a band I've had a lot of fun on. I'll talk a little bit about some equipment and antennas when we come back. Stick around. We'll be right back here on the Photime Podcast. It works great, and it's gorgeous. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the brand new Bridgecom Systems BCM 220 mobile radio. Full power 220 megahertz rig. You can buy it right now from bridgecomsystems.com. Tell them Kel sent you from the Photime Podcast. This thing is sweet. It sounds great. It works flawlessly. The manual is in English. It's so easy to read, so easy to program, easy to set up, and just let them know that you want one, and they'll get you one, right? bridgecomsystems.com. With Keith Schlottman, Kilo Romeo 7, Romeo Kilo. Keith, again, thank you for coming on the Photime Podcast, and thanks for your support for the Dayton trip as well. Appreciate that. Really do.
You bet. I'm having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we said as we were going out just a moment ago, we're going to talk equipment and antenna types for 10 meters. Now, you feel free to correct me because I am wrong a lot. My wife will attest to that. But most of the time, that if you want to talk locally or talk around to some of your friends, say in the same town, maybe in the same region, you may try a vertical antenna. Would that be a correct assumption there?
Yes. Yeah, I think vertical antennas actually are just fine. And as we mentioned earlier, when the band opens up, you don't need much of an antenna, and so even with it's not so crucial necessarily whether you have a horizontal beam style or a dipole horizontal or a vertical antenna. And I've been very successful with short vertical antennas. I know you can purchase a 10 meter only vertical antenna for a fairly good price, brand new. Mm-hmm.
What about the ham stick type antennas that the guys are using right now for the national parks on the air activations? I know that MFJ makes a 10 meter stick that's probably about 7 or 8, maybe 9 feet tall. Something like that work okay?
Yeah, something like that will work great. And that's one of the great things again about 10 meters, because it requires a shorter antenna. You won't need, in many cases, you don't need any loading coil at all at the bottom. Right. So you can have the entire antenna, full length. Mm-hmm. One of the best antennas I ever used mobile was a magnetic mount CB radio antenna that I just cut a short piece off of the top to make it a little bit shorter, because if a CB antenna is properly tuned, it's going to be just slightly longer than a 10 meter antenna. So you get a tuner or some way of testing the SWR, mm-hmm. and you just trim off a quarter inch at a time until you get the right SWR. And that little mag mount antenna, it just worked great. When when the band is open, that's all you need. Right. 25 watts mobile into a mag mount antenna, and you can work the world.
Now, a lot of guys, myself included, run the old Antron A99, the old CB Starduster type antennas, and I've had great success with it on 20 meters as well, which is a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. But you can find these older antennas on Craigslist or whatnot. Somebody getting that as a CB or whatever. You can get them for $25 to $30, and it's a great deal. They'll last forever if they've been in the smallest way maintained. But these old CB antennas, as you said, you trim the top down and you're ready to go.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the A99. I had one for many years that I used kind of as a secondary antenna in a location where I had a little beam. Of course, the beam is directional, and sometimes you don't know where the band is open to. So I would switch back and forth and use the vertical to figure out where the openings were coming from. And a lot of times I didn't need to switch back to the beam. I could just work stations off of the vertical. Those Antron 99, A99 style antennas are very good.
Let me ask you this. Do you have, is there a preferred height above ground for a 10 meter antenna of that sort?
Oh, I'm actually, as I've gone through my years of licensing with ham radio, I find myself changing my ideas continuously on antenna height. And in fact, recently I've been playing around a lot with a buddy pole, and I've found that the height above ground with that antenna really doesn't make as much of a difference as I thought it would.
Right.
And I remember I had a tower at one point, and somebody convinced me I needed to go higher, and we added, spent a lot of work to add another 20 feet to the tower, and I don't think it made a bit of difference. So maybe that's just because of where I am in Arizona, and the ground's practically solid rock anyway, but I don't think you need to be very high with your antenna, and I'm sure that some of the purists out there would probably tell me differently. But I think if it's the type of antenna that needs a ground plane, just make sure you throw out some radials, or you have your car body acting as the ground. But again, you truly can work 10 meters. Probably the best example I can give you of that is I have a handheld CB radio that was manufactured some years ago, and you could do a little modification and it would open it up and allow it to work on 10 meters. And with that thing and the rubber ducky, I was able to make contacts.
Well, you said a wet noodle would work, so I guess that's about as close to a wet noodle as you can actually get.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's like a coat hanger in or something. Anything metal, and you got an antenna.
Well, 10 meters is a lot of fun, and we've been talking about that. Keith is he's been a big fan of 10 meters for quite a long time. And it's a great band because, like you say, when it's open, it's wild. It's a lot of fun. And there's a lot of folks out there who are recently licensed who are looking to get into this HF thing. Maybe they don't have $1,200, $900 to buy an HF rig. They can find a nice used. Radio Shack made some really nice ones back in the day, as did a couple of other brands, but just a single band 10-meter rig is really not hard to come by. And when the time's right, with the wet noodle right there above the ground, you can have a lot of fun with it. Would you say? Yeah,
I think so. If you can find the old the Radio Shack HTX 10s, they're very good. There's some rigs called Ranger. I think it was the RCI 2950, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Those work pretty well. Nowadays, there are manufacturers making 10-meter only rigs and selling them in truck stops. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage, be a little cautious. I saw some the other day that they were selling them for like $499, and it was just very clear that they were really intended to be Citizens band radios, and they're just marketing them as 10-meter so that they can sell them at higher power, and then somebody's going to clip a diode or something to bring them down in frequency. And,
right.
You want to be careful with those because those can have some terrible audio. They can splatter all over the band, and
right.
But yeah, some of the 10-meter only rigs that were out there, even Alinco, not too long ago was selling a 10-meter only rig. And there's often people at Dayton that are talking about producing 10-meter only rigs. They come by our 1010 booth and talk about it. And so far, I haven't seen a lot of action in that regard. But
right.
I think there's even some Chinese manufacturers that are talking about 10-meter only rigs. So maybe we'll see something new
when we go to Dayton this year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool. It's the older Radio Shack rigs. I convinced a buddy of mine, Andy, to buy one of those not too long ago. He had he had some success with it. I can't say a lot of fun. He had some success with it. He's now grown up to a Yaesu 450 Delta, and my buddy William stepped up to an IC 718. But he has my Ranger, and Andy bought the Radio Shack rig at a local ham fest. So it's a lot of fun. 10 meters. I had a lot of fun with my old Uniden 2510 President something or another. That was a good one as well. So they're out there, folks. Like you said, you'll find some with big bright blue LEDs in it and a big huge channel knob. But you really want to look for something that has a VFO so you can fine tune the frequency. And in addition to that fact, make sure it's made for amateur radio. And you guys, if you don't know what I'm talking about, send me an email and we'll help you figure out what not to buy. Because because there's a lot of stuff out there that will take your money, but there are some good old used rigs on the market for folks who are looking to get into the 10-meter amateur band. Now, tell us a little about, since we're talking the 10-meter amateur band. I know that, like all bands, the sun and the sun cycle and the spots, they all cause problems for 10 meters just like everything else. But how does that work, and what's like the best time of year, best time of day? Kind of give us the easy peasy version of what works best on 10 meters.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The sun has a major effect on 10 meters. And on the biggest scale is the sunspot cycle. We're currently in what they call cycle 24. There's a cycle of about 11 years where the sun gets more active and then it becomes less active, and that's correlated with the number of sunspots that are on the surface of the sun. And so the peak of the last cycle occurred just a couple of years ago in 2013, and now we're on a decline. And so there's the solar activity that you might say helps our ionosphere to scatter radio waves is less, and that means the openings on 10 meters are becoming less frequent. That, however, doesn't mean at all that there's no activity. It just sometimes changes how far you can get or how often you'll hear the openings. On a more seasonal scale, you do find changes throughout the year, and in the summertime, for example, you get more of what's called sporadic E openings or E skip, and that produces shorter distance ionospheric reflections. That basically the layer of the ionosphere that reflects the signal is lower, and so it skips your signal for a shorter distance. And so we often get these E openings that allow, maybe I'm in Tucson, Arizona, for example, and it might make it easier for me to work somebody in Georgia using sporadic E than it would be when the ionosphere is reflecting from a higher level. And in the wintertime, we tend to have more openings for DX. And so, even recently, some of my friends over farther east yesterday were working into Africa and Europe. I wasn't working Africa and Europe from Arizona.
Right.
But as we go in towards the summer, we'll probably see less of those across the pond contacts and more of the within the states contacts.
But even with that being said, you just really never know what Old Soul's going to do tomorrow morning, and it could just get crazy in the ionosphere, and the next thing you know, you're making the contacts over the pond.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of it. I mean, if we wanted it to be 100% predictable, we could just as easily pick up our cell phone or something. So it's part of the fun is that unpredictability and just you never know. And there's times when it'll be in the evening and you just expect it to be completely quiet for the rest of the night. And by the way, on 10 meters, most of the time the openings are going to be usually during the daytime, maybe early evening. It's not real common to have 10-meter band openings in the middle of the night. That's when the lower bands like 40 meters and 80 meters become more active.
Right. But even then, you may find someone running a local net on, who knows what, 283875 or something, and you've got a group of 25 or 30 locals all banging it out, rag chewing on 10 meters like it was a 2-meter repeater.
And that's one of the fun things. There are many, many local nets, and you just never know. Sometimes everybody will be sitting around, and all of a sudden somebody pops in from 400 miles away, and they're there for 20 minutes, and then they just fade off into the quiet. And it's just it's fascinating how it works.
10 meters is a cool band, and we're going to keep talking about it here. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about 1010 International. This is one of the questions that I've never asked, but I've always wondered, what is it? And we're going to get to that in just a couple of minutes. We'll be back. This is Kel with Keith Schlottman, Kilo Romeo 7, Romeo Kilo, and this is the Photime Podcast. I get asked a lot of questions. One of the most asked questions is, I want to buy a mobile radio. What should I buy? Well, if you don't need these digital modes, if you don't need APRS, if you need just a strong, straight, dual band, detachable face mobile radio, I'm going to vote for the Kenwood TMV 71A every single time. I've got one in the van. I wish I had one in my wife's car, the house, the shack, my truck. I've got a lot of places to put them. I've just got to figure out a way to fund them. But they're an amazing rig, probably one of the easiest rigs I've used. And one of the best things about it is the crossband repeat. Down here in the farm, I live way out, guys. If you don't know that, I live way out. And getting to our local repeater, which is a phenomenal machine, takes a little bit of extra help, especially on UHF. So I can use my handy talkies here on the farm with the crossband repeat from the van with the Kenwood TMV 71 Alpha and get in the repeaters full quieting. Works like a champ. That's just one of the great features of the radio. Trust me, if you're looking for a really, really nice dual band detachable face, high power mobile rig, look no further than the Kenwood TMV 71 Alpha at mtcradio.com. Back with Keith Slotman, who is Kilo Romeo 7 Romeo Kilo. He's out in Tucson, Arizona, and we've been talking about 10 meters, and we're going to continue to talk about 10 meters, but we're going to talk about one of the questions I've always had as a member of ARRL. You get the QST magazines, and you see in the back of the magazine the advertisement for the 1010 International Net, and they've got a little picture there. I've seen it I don't know how many times, and I've always wondered, what is that? Sign up and get your ID number. And I'm thinking, is this like do you get a decoder ring? Is it one of those kind? Yeah, I didn't know. And I've just never even asked any of my owners or really even had a conversation with anyone about it. So thank you for coming on with us. But really, what is the 1010 International Net?
Okay, well, so again, it formed in 1962, actually, and really was intended to promote the use of 10 meters, and kind of a subset of that was to protect the band so that the FCC wouldn't give it away and make it part of the citizens band. And some of the guys out in Southern California got together, and they had a net that they on 10 meters that they met every morning at 11 a.m. At 10 a.m. in Southern California, and they would say, "See you on 10 at 10," and it kind of evolved into 1010. And one day they decided we're going to formalize this, and so they actually formed a nonprofit corporation, and they got a hat and put a bunch of numbers in it, and they sat around in a park and drew out numbers and said, "Okay, you're number 1, you're number 2, you're number 3." And part of what 1010 does is when somebody joins, they issue you a number which is good forever for you only. Mm-hmm. We don't repeat numbers. People can't request vanity numbers. It's just sequentially, issued numbers. We're currently we're only a couple of numbers off from number 77,500.
Wow.
That has been issued. And we have members all over the world. There's some very active members in other countries, and of course quite a few numbers here in the United States. And it's inexpensive. You can join 1010 for $10. And
a lot of tens here.
Yeah,
I'm seeing a pattern.
And there's other options. There's actually, we have a newsletter. There's a 32-page quarterly newsletter just packed with information about 10 meters, activity on 10, awards, and things like that. And if you want a paper copy, then the dues are actually $15. But if you want it electronic, it's $10. So we try to keep it very affordable. Mm-hmm. And it's a group of, people who are really, really enjoying 10 meters. And some people join just to get their number and then don't bother renewing ever again. And other people stay very active. And some people like myself are life members of 1010. Back in, I think it was 1992, they were looking for a treasurer, and I'm a CPA, and I volunteered to become the treasurer, and I have been treasurer ever since for 1010 International. So I've watched through the years some changes, and I think very positive changes. We have a very active, healthy club, and we go to conventions and hamfests all around the country. We'll be at Dayton with a booth there, and. But we still have every day, never on Sunday, but Monday through Saturday, we have a daily net, and there's actually two nets. There's one on 28,800 and another one on 28,380. and they're both phone nets. We also have some CW nets and different other activities. There's local chapters, and a lot of the local chapters have nets at a local level. And we have many QSO parties. The QSO parties are like contests, but they're very casual contests. And so if you tune up on 10 meters, for example, our next QSO party will be April 23rd and 24th that weekend. That's our spring digital party. And so for people who are interested in things like PSK 31, you can get on and make contacts and trade numbers. And that's one of the basic activities of 1010 is exchanging our numbers with each other. So when I have a QSO with somebody on 10 meters, I will tell them my 1010 number is 63324. And they will give me their number, and then we'll record those, and that can be used towards different awards or for the parties. Cool. But oftentimes people in those QSO parties, we don't call them contests because they are kind of casual, and a lot of times you'll run into a friend and next thing you know you're chatting for half an hour. So and that's just fine. It's all about getting people on the air and having fun on 10 meters.
Right. And
we also have
give us that date one more time for the next QSO party you guys are having.
So the digital one is April 23rd to 24th. The next Morse code CW one will be May 7th to 8th. And then we have a few various ones. There's June and July. The next official phone upper sideband QSO party would be August 6th to 7th. And all of these, they're open to everybody. You don't have to be a 1010 member to play, so to speak. But if you want to try to get an award, to be placed first place or something, you're supposed to be current.
Now, if I'm not a member and I hear one of these 1010 QSO parties coming in, and I make the contact, the guy's going to give me his number. What is the most polite way for me to say, I'm sorry, I'm not a member of the 1010 International?
Pretty much you just say I'm not a member, and okay. What you'll find is that they're all very happy anyway to talk to you. And cool. Some of them, in fact, the way I became a member back in whenever it was, I was in a QSO party and I told the gentleman I'm not a member, and he actually went out of his way and sent me a package full of old newsletters so I could find out what it was all about.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and
the spirit of ham radio.
Exactly. Yes, and nowadays, what we normally would do is encourage people to go look at the website, which is just www.10-10.org.
Okay. And
you can either spell that out TEN-TEN, or you can use the numbers 10-10.
Very good. Very good.
And,
now, but you guys have the parties. You also do awards, scholarships, QSL Bureau. Tell us a little bit about some of that other stuff you guys do.
Yeah, we have all kinds of awards, like worked all states, but this would be a version where you work somebody with a 1010 number in every state. Just very pretty much kind of correlates to a lot of the other types of awards that you see. We also have something called the Bar Award. Once you've worked 500 numbers, you can submit a log and you'll receive a kind of a new number. It's it doesn't replace the other number, but it's called the bar number. We have things like the OMXYL Award. If you work teams of husbands and wives who are both licensed and both members, you get that's kind of a tough one because there's not a lot of those teams.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to convince this one over here.
We have a DX award, and there's a mobile award. We something new that we've established just this year is the Scouts Award, and we're trying to encourage some of the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to get on the air as well as the leaders, and so there's a tie-in there. We have a scholarship program. A lot of the members we learned were very interested in supporting the young people, and so every year we give away, and we've done this now for probably 20-some years, but we give, currently it's a $6,000 a year scholarship that we give away to some some worthy students who are in need of a little assistance there.
That is awesome. Do you guys do anything with school clubs? You have any, or is that more on a local level?
Yeah, we don't directly with school clubs, but I'm sure if somebody wanted some help, or I'm sure we've got members that would gladly help out.
Right. Very cool. I think I'm convinced. I didn't even know what it was, and I want to sign up. And I'm being serious. I'm not just saying it because you're on the show here with me. I mean, it sounds very interesting. It's easy with a 10-meter antenna sitting here waiting to be used, just to turn on the 10 meters on the old Kenwood and just call. I mean, wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to join. Well,
what I tell people is, if you're an amateur radio operator, amateur radio is a service, and we're here to provide a service to the public. We're also allowed to enjoy our hobby, and we also should be trying to help our hobby from within, and that means supporting things like your podcast and the ARRL and the manufacturers who provide equipment to us, and other organizations. And so, sometimes I'll tell people, you may not be a gung-ho 10 meters is everything in your life, but It's still worth supporting, because when it comes down to it, we're kind of a family that needs to take care of each other and make sure that the hobby continues to exist and thrive, and the best way to do that is to support. And so it's for $10 or $15 dues, it's a pretty simple way of being involved. And then when you get on 10 meters and somebody's looking for that number, you're helping them out if you have one that you can give to them. So even if you're not going to go all in and become a 10-10 fanatic, it's still good to have that number and be able to share it when people are looking for it.
I'm going to get me a number. I may have a number before the podcast post.
All right.
So I can share.
So let me tell you a little bit about getting a number, because I'm guessing some people would find this a little bit interesting. To become a member of 1010, you actually have to work 10 members of 1010. You have to collect 10 numbers. And so on the website or in our newsletter, and oftentimes at Hamfest and at Dayton, we hand out free copies of the news.
Right.
But you'll see a little log where you record those 10 people that you've worked. And so it's not because we're trying to create a barrier to entry into the organization, but it's been this way since day one, which in a sense should tell you a little bit about 10 meters itself, because every one of those 77,500 members, except for the original 20 or so who had already been doing it anyway, but every one of the members has gone through the process of working 10 members, which means there's activity on 10 meters to collect those numbers. There has not been a single month since I've been treasurer that we haven't collected a number of new members' applications. In other words, there's never a month where there's just no activity and people can't collect those numbers. So if somebody is motivated to join 1010, they will get those numbers. And you can get them locally. You can even, it's completely legitimate to put, one side of the parking lot a mobile rig and the other side of the parking lot another mobile rig, and have people get together and swap numbers so you can make your log.
Yeah.
I've seen that done.
Well, I saw that on the application, or the membership button there, and I was like, well, really? I'll have to ask that. And thank you for answering, because I was getting ready to ask that. But it's kind of like, well, why do we have to take a test to become an amateur radio? Well, we want to make sure that you have at least enough desire to pass a 35-question, nearly open book test. Mm-hmm. It's not asking too much. And if you got the equipment, you should be able to make 10 contacts on 10 meters, surely.
Well, and to be honest with you, if you go during a contest weekend, which, again, those dates of the QSO parties are always listed on our website, and I'd encourage people to go and browse through the website, but you can easily collect your 10 numbers just in that way,
right.
in working that QSO party.
And if it's not during one of those times you're on 10 meters, you're trying to get your 10 numbers, I don't guess folks will be too offended if you say, hey, would you happen to be a member of 1010?
That's correct.
Probably hear that a lot, I'd guess.
I do, yeah. You hear that pretty often from people who are working on it.
Or what about CQ 1010? I mean, would that be appropriate?
Well, yes, it is. There's many people that do call CQ 1010. So if you're tuning around on 10 meters, you're likely to hear somebody saying CQ 1010. We try to be a little careful about that because we don't want people to feel like, we don't want anybody thinking they don't want to talk to me because I'm not a 1010 member.
I got you.
This is not an exclusive club, and we're not snobs. And and unfortunately, anytime you get 77,000 people, you're going to get somebody that doesn't really play with the crowd. And so if anybody ever runs into somebody who's like, well, you don't have a 1010 number, I don't really want to talk to you, just understand that's not at all what we promote.
That's them, not you as a whole.
Yeah. Right.
Well, cool. Let's come back in just a second. I want to talk about how to get the most out of working on 10 meters. It's been a great conversation so far. I've learned a lot. I have now decided I'm going to become, to the best of my ability, an official 1010 International Net member. And I've got a radio right here that can help me do that. But we'll be back in just a minute. We're going to continue the conversation with Keith, who is Kilo Romeo 7 Romeo Kilo, back in just a moment. All right, so I'm pretty much covered when it comes to 220 now, and that's all thanks to BridgeCommSystems.com. Just a few years ago, our local club ordered the BridgeComm Systems 220 repeater. Works flawlessly. We're having great service out of it. Not too long ago, I got the new BridgeComm Systems Handy Talkie, 220 megahertz, single band, full power. It's a awesome little handheld. The English language non-translated, written in English manuals really help a lot. It's a great rig. Check it out. Also, they have their brand new mobile radio, the BCM 220. You can order it right now, bridgecommsystems.com. You're looking to get into 220 megahertz. bridgecommsystems.com is the place to go. Back with Keith Slotman. His call is Kilo Romeo 7 Romeo Kilo. Keith has been a listener of the Photime podcast for some time. Thank you, Keith, for listening. He's also a supporter of the show, and he's going to be at Dayton this year with 1010 International Net, along with me. We'll talk about that in the close here in just a few minutes. Yeah, totally excited, man. Stoked about it. And 1010 International Net will have a booth at Dayton. Will 1010 International Net have a booth at Dayton with an operating 10-meter station in it?
Kel, we will not have a station there. And the reason I say that, you never know. It could pop up. But I will tell you, and I think maybe one of your in your previous episode, somebody maybe mentioned this. The RF environment in Dayton is pretty much the noisiest, worst RF environment you could possibly imagine. And trying to actually operate a radio inside the exhibit hall where we'll be is next to impossible. Even a lot of HTs just can't handle the intermod that's going on and stuff. So, and it's very loud. There's so many people, and so historically we have not attempted to set up a station.
Right.
That doesn't mean I haven't thought about it many times, because I've thought, imagine if we just put a little sign up and said instant qualifying right here on the spot. Can, we'll get it set up a station across the hall and work back and forth, and people can collect their numbers right there on the spot. 2 stations, 2 dummy loads, and you're ready to go. Yeah, maybe we'll work something out.
10 element beams, you never know. I mean, come on,
I think a little something like an 817 and a MP1 would probably be just fine. Again, the problem is that just the RF. It's just loud.
Yeah. Well, we do trade shows as well. My wife and I, with her book. My wife has a book, and even that, man, it's insane. It's for hairdressers, the beauty industry and whatnot. And, it's just loud techno music. Yeah, you just you go home tired from listening to everything going on around you. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about 10 meters. If somebody wants to get on 10 meters tomorrow and make a contact, what's the best thing for them to do?
So, the first thing that I will say is if everybody is listening and nobody's talking, it's going to sound like the band is dead. And so one of the most important things you can do to get 10 meters active is to call CQ. You just mentioned a minute ago, calling CQ 1010. You'll hear people saying that, but CQ 10 meters, just CQ for 5 minutes, and then unkey and see who's, however, whatever floats your boat on calling CQ. But the main point is, if nobody's putting out a signal, then we're all going to think there's nobody out there, and it could be there's 1,000 people and we're all listening. That's probably how a lot of repeaters, 2-meter repeaters, are these days. Nobody wants to talk, everybody's listening and wondering why nobody's talking.
Let me ask you this: is there preferred digital modes on 10 meters? RTTY, PSK31, CW. Is that about the top of the heap there?
Those three are the most common, and I would even subdivide that into. CW is probably the more experienced ham operators, although we've had a huge resurgence in CW, especially because of computer-generated code. And if you have a good software program that can generate and decode CW, you really don't even need to be an expert in paddling and decoding it. You can let the computer do that. And so there's a lot of CW. CW, by the way, oftentimes will get through when the band isn't quite as good. CW will be easier than phone to work.
Okay.
Digital modes, PSK31, and I would say the place to hang out for the PSK31 digital mode is 28.070. So on if you tune up to 28.070 megahertz and set your thing to PSK31 mode, whatever your system you're using, you're very likely to see some signals there.
Cool.
The RTTY tends to really only come out either during contests or DXpeditions. For some reason, the DXpeditions favor RTTY for their digital mode operating. And, interestingly enough, DXpeditions will pop up on 10 meters, even though everybody else thinks the band is completely dead. And, an example of that, back in January, I worked the Kilo 5 Papa Palmyra and Jarvis Island DXpedition on 10 meters.
Nice.
And it was on a day when, if you look on some of the propagation prediction things, it said the band is poor. The conditions are poor on 10 meters, and there's nobody's spotting anything. Well, I tuned around, and here they are calling CQ. And so, anyway, but yes, RTTY, PSK31, and CW.
Okay, all right. Beacons. We've never really talked about beacons at all on this program, but tell us just a little bit about 10-meter beacons and where we can find some of those. Yeah,
so the beacon subband in 10 meters is all the way from 28.20 to 28.30 megahertz. You don't normally find beacons quite up towards the top end of that range, but down around 28.200, 28.220. There's quite a few, actually. People have put up these beacons, and what those are is there's stations. Think of it like a lighthouse. There's a station sending Morse code on maybe every 2 minutes. They'll send out their call sign, and you can actually go and find if you just Google 10-meter beacons, you'll find lists of these things. And so you can listen, and you can actually figure out where the propagation is working and not working by which beacons you're hearing. I've actually seen posts on Facebook where guys will say, I'm hearing the beacons, but nobody's on the band. The band's, in other words, the band is open, but nobody's thinks talking. It's open. Yeah. And that's kind of unusual. You don't find beacons normally on other bands very often, but 10 meters, there's a pretty active network of beacons. Some of them are very sophisticated. They'll do a directional beacon and move it around, like every minute they'll go point a different direction, and so depending on which minute you're hearing them, you'll know where they're coming from. But it's a very unusual thing, but it's a good way. So sometimes if people don't know about beacons and you're tuning around the band in that zone, you may actually think that there's somebody operating, and you'll hear this call sign and you're like, oh, are they calling CQ, or how come I'm returning their call and they're not responding to me? So it's good to be aware that there is this beacon subband, and that's literally, they're just automated. They're lighthouses on the air. And
anybody can put one of those up. This is a licensed amateur.
That's correct. Yeah, even a technician, as long as they stay within the power limitations. Right. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So we got QSO parties coming up, along with contest weekends. Contests are always a good chance just to get on 10 meters and see if anybody's there. 10-meter contest is an especially awesome time to get on 10 meters and have a lot of fun as well. And you mentioned the D-Expeditions.
Yeah, and just on the contest, by the way, the ARRL 10-meter contest is one of the top. People love that contest.
It's a trip, man.
And that's not a 10-10 thing. That's but I love that contest, and everybody does. And it's every time it happens, the band magically opens up, and you say, well, what, is it just because there's so much RF going into the air that it's like creating its own ionosphere or something?
It's warming it, guys. It's warming it.
But again, contests prove, and it just like the WPX contest that was this past weekend, suddenly there's signals coming, I'm working Maryland and Argentina and Virgin Islands, and it's like, how come these guys weren't here 2 days ago?
Right.
And it's not because the band just happens to coincide with contests. It's because nobody's trying. So great time to work people is on contest weekends. The D-Expeditions, they try very hard. I just looked, there was a D-Expedition to South Sandwich and South Georgia Islands, I think it was last month. Maybe it was 2 months ago, but not too long ago, the VP8 STI, VP8 SGI D-Expeditions. And so I went and looked in just out of curiosity, and the South Sandwich one, which was one that they basically shut down early because of weather. But, they still made a couple thousand 10-meter contacts.
Wow.
And it's very common to, D-Expeditions somehow, again, they just open up the band and
people start talking.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about the beacons. I know that you can go to any number of websites, including 10-10.org, and see the band condition report tab there. Is that the best way to kind of halfway determine if the band's working that day or not? We're in a period right now in amateur radio that is like never before in terms of information, and there's so much data out there, and some of it is useful and some of it's maybe not so useful. So I encourage people to try multiple sources. So certainly those condition indicators they're interesting, and it's good to watch those and start developing the trend. Uh-huh. But I also encourage, first of all, just looking on a DX pack, a DX cluster, which is a scrolling list of people that are reporting some of the long distance contacts that they're making. So let's say, for example, if I work somebody in, I don't know, there was a station this morning in Iraq that was operating actually, and I didn't work them, but suppose I had worked them, I might say, hey, I bet other people nearby would want to work that station also. Yeah.
And so I'll post a little thing on this scrolling cluster list that says there's a station in Iraq. It tells his call sign and what frequency he's on, and then people can go tune to that and try to work them. And if you watch that cluster, you can actually filter it and say, show me only the 10-meter spots. Ah. And that will give you an idea. If you start looking at those spots, you realize, well, hey, everybody who's posting a spot right now is from, 3 land and 4 land, and I'm in 7 land, so I'm probably not going to be able to work those.
Right.
But it may, or maybe you see everybody who's posting is in Russia, and the band hasn't moved over to the States yet. So,
and when in doubt, you can always just turn the big knob.
Yeah. Well, that is the number one way. Absolutely. Yeah.
I've never used the cluster. I don't get a lot of time on HF anyway, but Without the internet up here, it does me no good. So, I'm old school, don't even know it.
Yeah,
I'm just a big knob guy.
I mean, in some ways, it's more fun to, again, it's the easier you make things, the less magical it becomes. So.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of magic, amateur radio is all about the magic of radio, and we've been talking about the magic of 10 meters and how many things are out there for everybody, including the technicians who sometimes forget that they have HF privileges on many bands, but they have voice privileges on 10 meters. So again, if you're a newly licensed ham, you haven't got your general upgrade yet, don't worry. You can get on and enjoy HF. You spend about 10 minutes when 10 meters is open. You'll be dying to get your general upgrade so you can enjoy all the bands to some extent. So don't write 10 meters off. It's a great band. It's a lot of fun. And if you think that you're interested, we want to encourage you. I'm going to go join as soon as I can get these 10 connections. I'm going to put my application in, I guess I should say, for the 1010 International Net. Tell us again where to find that and anything else we may need to know about 1010.org.
Yeah, so the website is ten-ten.org, just 10-10.org. Again, the organization has been in existence now, I guess, 54 years. It's one of the largest amateur radio organizations in the world, period. And it's thriving. We're a very, very healthy organization because we're very conservative and just we want to continue focusing on the main priority, which is to promote 10 meters. If you're going to be in Dayton, I would encourage you to stop by the booth, say hi. You'll meet some of the officers and directors, and you can tell us what we can do to make 10 meters better for everybody. We can't salt the ionosphere, but other than that, we'll do what we can.
Yeah, well, the North Koreans wanted to help us with that, but no thanks, guys. No thanks. Well, I really appreciate you being on, Keith. I've learned a lot. Like I said, I had those questions since I've got licensed, even before. I just had no idea what it was. But it really sounds like something that could help you get some contacts made and be a part of a larger group of folks who are out there working to continue and improve the hobby. And that's exactly what we try to do here on the show. So thank you for your service to the club, and again, your time here with us and your support of the program as well. It's Keith Schlottman. His call is Kilo Romeo 7 Romeo Kilo. And Keith, I can't say a whole lot past thank you. And I know it's a dry heat, but it still gets hot out there, so be careful this summer as it comes up.
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity, Cal. I'm looking forward to seeing you up in Dayton and also working you on 10 meters and swapping a 1010 number with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith. We'll have him back on again, I'm sure, to continue to help us get educated here on 10 meters. Who knows? It might even go crazy this summer. We need to get him back in here to help us with that. Well, there you go, folks. Is there anything about 10 meters that you still don't know? Because if there is, we may need to have Keith in. But I think we covered it very plainly. Here's the thing. If you're a tech, find you a 10-meter rig, find you an HF rig, get on the air. You need to get your general anyway, but 10 meters is a great place to start. Got some contesting coming up into the summer. 10 meters is a lot of fun, and it's a load of fun like we've been talking about when it's open. So make sure you check it out. Check out the 1010 International Net group as well. We'll have all the links to what we talked about on the program in our show notes page, photimepodcast.com. Again, this is episode number 49. That means the next one is going to be 50. Now, I still want to do it live. I really, really want to do it live. And I'm thinking somewhere around the 14th, 15th, 16th, or 17th of April, we may try to do a live program one evening. Maybe that Sunday evening. I think that may be the 16th of April. I can't remember. And I should have already looked that up. And it would be the 17th of April. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for. I don't know if it'll happen, but you'll have to be following us on social media, the Facebook group, the Facebook pages, our website, Twitter. We're there. Google+. We will be posting updates, and if you can participate live, of course, that would be awesome. But if you can, of course, we'll have the podcast posted on that following Wednesday like we always do. So make sure you're following us, you're tracking with us, maybe checking Periscope every once in a while when Kel puts his face up there that you don't want to see, but that's okay. Anyway, we thank you for listening. We appreciate you participating with us. Again, thank you for those that funded the campaign, 211%. I'm just completely humbled, and I cannot wait to shake your hand at the Dayton Hamvention and say thank you. And until next time, guys, we'll just do it. We'll let you know what we're doing. We'll let you know what we're doing for episode 50. It's coming up. We're excited about it, and I hope you are too. Until next time, guys, 73, and God bless you. See you.
Thanks for listening, downloading, and subscribing to Photime, the other ham radio podcast, presented by mtcradio.com. To subscribe, comment, share, or review, visit our show site at photimepodcast.com. Till next time, 73, y'all.